So, Barakallahu Fikum for attending. This is an interesting topic. I have gotten asked to speak about this many times. But one of the key encounters that I get with people's concerns about their children is when I get contacted by worried parents who are telling me that their children are having doubts about Islam and they need help. In worst case scenarios, they also tell me that their children have actually become atheists. Very few. I'm not really encountered anyone that said that their children become Christians, but becoming atheists was a very big one. Mostly because many Muslims understand that Islam is the best religion out of all the other ones, and so even when they have doubts about Islam, for them, if Islam doesn't make sense, then nothing makes sense, and therefore they will leave religion altogether. Any kind of belief system they will generally not adopt it. But basically, the the real the real problem when people leave Islam is obviously they become then atheists. The problem before that is them leaving Islam and them having doubts. And so we have to ask ourselves a very serious question, which is what is the problem? What is causing children to leave Islam? And how do we deal with that? How do we prevent that from happening? And really, if you really want a real solution to this, it's going to take something along the lines of, and something that many people obviously don't want to do, which is you're going to have to examine how you apply Islam yourself and how you understand Islam yourself. Because if you understand Islam as something that was merely passed down to you by your parents, and the only reason that you're a Muslim is because your parents were Muslims, then you'll have no ability to persuade your children on the truth of Islam. You're only going to be hoping that they stick to Islam as you stuck to Islam, without asking any questions, and with simply just taking it blindly from your parents. We know that the Quran actually condemns the kind of taqleed where you take blindly from the parents without coming to a conviction in yourself. So we see in the Quran, there's a verse that talks about the pagans saying to the Muslims, will we reject what our ancestors were upon? We based just because of you're telling us to do so. Despite the fact that this message of Islam came with proofs, came with evidences, these people said, "Will we, leave the religion of our forefathers?" So, and then the Quran says that their forefathers had no knowledge, and they only followed conjecture, or they invented things. Different verses of the Quran say these things. So this is the response to the Quran is that your ancestors don't have authority just because they're your ancestors, but rather you need to know the proofs, the evidences. The Quran is filled with verses of the Quran telling you to pardon me. Okay. So we then need to know, well, what do we need to do as Muslims first? To do as Muslims, the first thing that you need to do is to know why you're a Muslim. That's the most and first and foremost important thing is, why are you a Muslim? You can't take it for granted that, well, my parents said to me so. And it is true that the fitrah in Muslims, the fitrah in any human being, naturally inclines you to a belief that makes sense, that the belief in one God is a natural inclination in human beings. Yes. However, these inclinations don't give you specifics. No one says, well, I don't need the Quran, I'm going to let my fitrah tell me how much rakah I have to pray each day, or what these are the rules and regulations and things I need to do. No, you need guidance from revelation. The fitrah simply inclines you in the general direction, you could say, but you need You need you need a compass. You still need the compass to take you on the straight path, and not the fitra doesn't it pushes you in the general direction, but it does not actually make you go down a straight path. It's like I give an analogy really. The equivalent is if you're walking down the street and you smell a really nice cooking smell, someone's really like a restaurant smell or cooking smell, and it's coming in a rough direction. You can tell it's coming from over there, but you don't know where it is exactly. You don't know where it can be coming from. You're just detecting that, oh, there's a smell, maybe it's stronger in this direction, but you don't know where in particular. Or however, if you have the restaurant on your phone, on your maps app on your phone, and it will tell you exactly where to go to get to that to get to a restaurant. So this is the difference between revelation and fitra, and you can't always rely on the fitra because the fitra is very vague in its direction. The fitra wants things to make sense. That's correct. That's true, and it wants to discover the truth behind all things, or at least it wants an explanation for the truth behind every reality. The fitra does that. That's why it moves people. It moves even the atheist to want to discover some kind of truth. But the problem is that it doesn't tell you where specifically the ultimate truth behind all reality is. It just moves you to want to find that reality, that truth. And it moves you to want to find a unifying truth. So an explanation explains everything, the ultimate source of all things. For us, it is Tawheed. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his uluhiyyah, his rububiyyah, his complete control and mastery over all things. His ownership of over all things, his determining of all things, his creating of all things, and then after that, the things that he set into motion, the order of the universe that he has created, we then study the laws of physics and things like this, which tells us how he's ordered these things. Whereas to an atheist, for example, they just stop at the laws of physics and they don't go beyond that. They don't go what's behind that, actually, what's actually ordered it in that particular way, and they try to find excuses to avoid going further than that. So just having you can't just rely on the fitra to give you the exact location, because, as I said, someone might come thinking there's a nice smell to a restaurant, to a street, and they'll enter the wrong restaurant, right? Because because the smell could be coming from all over a whole bunch of places. So you need to understand why you're a Muslim, and this starts with you asking the basic questions of the Deen of Islam. And the reason why this is important to your children is because your children are going to ask these questions. Your children already will probably naturally be asking these questions. Okay. But the answers that you gave them are not going to be the same, are not going to be as sufficient as the answers that you were given as a child are not going to be the same that will convince your children, mainly because we have the internet today. And mainly because we have more movies than ever before. We have more penetration of Western culture, and a lot of Hollywood and a lot of Western media is dominated by people who are highly secular, right? They are very secular, very they're atheist inclined. There are some American movies which are made by Christians and are meant to be instructive in Christianity. They're meant to give Christian morals, be about Christianity, praising Christianity in some way, encouraging you to be Christian in some way, or with a Christian worldview. And those are very few. You can count them on a few. Well, not on a few hands, but you can. They are a fraction of the videos, the movies, the cultural products that are coming out of the West. And even those movies that are of a more Christian theme, they don't do so well, and they're not as well produced, because the people producing them probably were not experienced. They didn't go into filmmaking for fun. They were probably Christians that were given they fundraised to make a movie. They got an inexperienced scriptwriter, because Christians don't, devout Christians in America, they're not usually into the cultural arts scene of the American society, and therefore their Christian movies don't do so well. That's why there's never a great blockbuster movie that's a Christian movie. Very few ones. Like I think there was one called Passion of the Christ, which was focused about the the alleged biblical story of Jesus being tortured and then crucified. The term passion is a Greek is a word which denotes actually suffering. So this is where you see very rare occasions where you see, you know, specific Christian movies, but most of them are secular, atheist. A lot of sci-fi is basically secular and atheist, and it talks about themes beyond humanity, the universe. It makes it tries to explain that humans are products of aliens, we're created by aliens, or we're created the universe has no purpose behind it, or you need to find your own purpose in life, which is a typical and key theme in Western society now, which is you have no purpose in life. Your aim is to find your own purpose in life. That's the greater mystery, is to find your own purpose of life. There is no higher reason than that. And those particular values are actually fed into your children. So your children are going to ask a lot of questions because they're going to be faced with a lot of dilemmas when they see these movies and these cultural products, and you can't prevent them from seeing them. They'll see it. At some point, they'll see them. Online, they'll bump into the various websites. YouTube, of course, is a big problem, but they'll see it. So you need to be prepared. You actually need to know why you are a Muslim and why Islam makes sense. That means that you need to study. You need to start rediscovering your deen. Now, I was once asked by, I was flying on a plane back from New Zealand, and I was approached by a Muslim brother on the plane who recognized me, and he said, "Excuse me, do you have some time?" I said, "I'm on the plane. I'm a captive audience. You can, go ahead." There was no one sitting next to me, so he sat next to me and wanted to speak to me. So he said that he has a problem, and his problem was that, like, firstly, his father had he had a very good relationship with his father. They're a very strong, very good bond. And his father, unfortunately, rahimullah, passed away from cancer. And his father, knew he was dying and told his son, "Look, I'm dying, but don't worry, it's all Allah's plan. This is how Allah wants it. I'm going back to Allah. This is not a cause for being sad. Although I know I won't be here, but this is we should always be happy to go back to our Creator, and this is what Allah wants. This is for a good that Allah knows that we don't know." So and he basically told his son how to accept it. But okay, his father passed away, and his son had a very good relationship with his father, and they used to go to Jummah together. His father taught him how to recite the Quran and all these things. He was an Arab, and of course, so his father was could obviously, he could teach him to read the Quran and so on and so forth, and actually with some understanding. However, he said, "I have a problem. I don't feel as connected in my prayer. I don't feel the connection I used to have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have an emotional doubt, a doubt where I wonder if this is I'm not having that same feelings of connectedness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I did beforehand. And I have a doubt which I can't rationally explain." And so I thought about it for a second, and I realized, I said, "Look, your Islam was connected to your father, right? Your Islam was part of your relationship with your father. That's how you understood it. That's how you appreciated it. Yeah, like your father was everything to you, and he was a Muslim, and you followed him in Islam, and that was your connection, and you felt everything was right with the world. But when he passed away, that, in a way, that key pillar of why you're a Muslim, what made you connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what made you connect to that reality disappeared. Your father made Islam real for you, made it seem like it was a reality for you, and that's why that was your Islam. That's why you became Muslim. Well, not Muslim, but why you are Muslim, and why you practiced it. You need to rediscover Islam for yourself. That's the only way you are going to basically come with a real bond, a real understanding of Islam, a real bond to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that really is the situation that you actually, watching this, who are parents, you have to do the same things. You need to rediscover why you are Muslim. And that way you can enable your children to rediscover why they are Muslim, not just simply that they're following you. Now, as I said, you have the fitr on your side. You don't need to be worried that, oh, what if he asks too many questions or she asks too many questions and then she leaves Islam? Well, um, obviously everything, belief is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's not for any of you to, Allah guides, and all you can do is make dua. But uh, it's not a question of, well, if I tell my children to rediscover Islam or to think of it for themselves, they might not be Muslim. And let's say the worst case scenario happens, that they decide that they don't want to be a Muslim, or they think it doesn't make sense. That was always going to happen, right? If that's the case, this dunya revealed what was really in their hearts all along, and so that you really should not fear. You should not fear basically that they ask questions, because ultimately the first thing is that whether they're guided or not is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the point. But the second issue is that they need answers, and you have to give them those answers. If you don't know the answers, if they will ask tons of questions you might not know the answers to, you can refer them to obviously videos online, dawah videos, dawah articles, if anyone still reads websites anymore, and or to people that know. But where you actually get not as many good answers is, unfortunately, if you take children to speak to alims. Now, an alim, many alims today are taught about what Islam says. They say, here's what Islam is, what it says. They know this, but they don't know why, right? As in, why is Islam true? How is it true? They'll just repeat what they understand. The Quran tells them to say, well, the Quran says this, the Quran says that. But an alim is taught in various madaris what Islam says, what Islam teaches, but not the proofs of Islam so much. And so when a child will go to the alim and ask, is hell eternal? And the alim will say, yes, it is eternal. The alim knows that. Well, I suppose we all know this, but the alim could say this. The alim could talk about, well, Muslims that have an overflowing of bad deeds on their account, more than their good deeds, and they're not forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they never repented, then they will go to hell for a temporary time, but they will come out and inshallah, and they will go to Jannah afterwards. Now the alim could explain the ins and outs of these things, but the alim can't. Most alims, most ulama can't explain, or because they were never taught it, and they usually never thought about this. Why isn't eternal hell just for finite crimes, right? So a crime, a sin, even if you lived 100 years of killing and murdering and raping and doing bad things, really nasty things, they'll say, or even a life of shirk, even if you were to live 1,000 years and every day you spent murdering someone and raping and committing shirk and so on and so forth, how does that justify an unlimited, eternal punishment in hell? Now, most ulama, in my experience from speaking to ulama, is that they don't actually know that. They'll give some kind of an answer, but it's not the answer to that question. They'll simply say, well, this is Allah's justice because Allah says so. That's it. To summarize, really, this is the way it is, right? And that's not really an answer. Now, you might be thinking, well, why is that not a sufficient answer, right? I mean, like, Allah's decreed something the way it is. That's the way it is. That's it. Let's say, well, yes, the Allah created the universe by His decree. He didn't have to create the universe. Allah created everything by His decree, and ordered everything the way it is. He didn't have to do anything He needed to do in terms of making the universe and everything in it. Nothing's forcing Him to make things. I see someone's hand up. Don't worry, I'll get to you in a sec. But there's it's always it's always good to explain a hikmah behind things. And I'll give you an example from the Sunnah. So a man comes to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and says, to paraphrase, "O Prophet, I'm a young man, and I feel very lustful, and this is something that's hard to control for me. Basically, can you give me permission to commit zina?" Right? Because I'm a youthful guy. I'm very lustful. Give me permission to commit zina. So, what did the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? Did he say, "Ma'ayib alayk," shame upon you? How dare you? This is, you're going against Allah's decree. You should fear Allah. Ittaqullah, fear Allah. Why are you doing this? This is going to take you into Jahannam. Did he say that? No. What did he say instead? He said, paraphrase, would you like me to make it permissible for your mother to commit zina? So the man says, no, I would never, I would not, never want this. And so then the Prophet Muhammad said, then how can I make it permissible for you to commit zina then? And the guy understood the hikmah, the wisdom, right? That it actually goes against your fitrah. You revere your mother, you look up to your mother. Your mother is sacred for her children, and for the especially for for boys, the mother's very sacred. They have a very strong bond, and a boy or a young man might not understand that sleeping around with other women and not having a marriage with them, a proper marriage with commitment and so on, might not understand that if you sleep with a woman and you don't give them commitment, that's a disrespect. Right? That is a debasing, disrespecting. They're just a body for you to use. Basically, they're not actually a human being with emotions and someone that deserves responsibility, that deserves rights. So you feel this is fitra, that your mother deserves that kind of respect. But the man didn't understand that, and so the Prophet Muhammad gave that as a response, and that response was effective. The man already knew that it was haram to commit zina. He already knew that it was forbidden. Allah had forbade it, but he had understood that prohibition as being arbitrary. Allah just said it. That's it. Allah just said it. That's it. Right. So he thought, well, if Allah just said it, he can maybe make an exception. He could decree an exception. And that the Prophet Muhammad can ask Allah to decree an exception for him. So the man didn't understand that this is the Allah's laws are part of the universal creation of us. His laws for us are connected to our own nature, the nature He created us in, and including our intellect, including our desire for respect and dignity. All this is part of our nature. Allah decrees these. He knew these. He created us with this, and He gave us the right laws for us to act according to our nature and without going against our nature or other people's natures. So this is the hikmah that was explained to the child, and you need to understand hikmah. You need to understand how to explain why there's an eternal hell, for example, when sins are finite. There are two elements you can bring to that. The first element is that if someone commits a crime, let's say it takes me 5 seconds to shoot someone in the head, bang, and they die within 5 seconds. The whole thing takes 5 seconds. Should my punishment only be 5 seconds? Because the crime I committed was 5 seconds, right? Well, no, right? The crime, the gravity of the crime is more than the time it takes for me to commit the crime. So then my punishment, if I was to do that, would require something more severe than simply 5 seconds of being tortured or 5 seconds of being locked up in prison. So that establishes the principle that the crime can be graver than the time it takes you to commit that crime. And then the principle is, well, how grave is the crime of shirk, for example? How grave is the crime of associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So people might say that and in our society we grade crimes differently in according to gravity. For example, we would grade the killing of let's say a 25-year-old man differently than the killing of a 1-year-old baby. People would say, well, the 1-year-old baby, is more innocent than the man in a way. The baby is completely innocent. The baby's never done it. He doesn't know what is good and bad, and yet is helpless. So the baby doesn't commit evil. So it's worse to kill a baby than it is to kill a 25-year-old man. And so the gravity of the crime of killing the baby is worse than the gravity of the crime of killing a 25-year-old man, or a 30-year-old man, or a 40-year-old man, or something like this. Although people might say killing like a 70-year-old man or 80-year-old man is also bad, because they're also at that age relatively harmless, and they're your elders as well. They deserve respect, more respect. So killing is bad. It's bad across the whole board, but there's a cultural understanding. It's worse to kill some people more than other people. Just it's a greater evil in some ways. You've committed greater evil, and that's merely because of how they are respected in society, or the respect deserving of those people. So how much respect is deserved? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is an eternal creator, who does not commit sins, is not evil, and is the creator of all things, is sustaining you. And so you owe the creator of the universe simply to acknowledge that he is the creator of the universe. So how much greater is that crime? How much greater is it? Is one argument. Another argument you could use, just to give you an example, there's many other things, but one other example argument is simply that the people in the people in Jahannam are in the right place for them. Those who are there who have been ordered to stay there forever. They're in the right place, and the reason why they're in the right place is because, well, let's take a great example. I think Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, maybe, who knows? Maybe towards the end of his life, he might embrace Islam, right? Allah knows. We do not know. However, if he dies upon what he's doing and his hating of Islam and killing of Muslims, massacre, butchering of them, and this was what he was. That's what he was. His intrinsic essence is a rejecter of truth, a committer of bloodshed. If he was to go to Jahannam, and let's say he burns for 100 million years, let's say 100 million years he burns. If you take him out again, yeah, he's burnt off. He's burnt. He's done all these. He's had these consequences, but he's still the same person that went in. Right, he just was tortured and burnt, yes, but he's still the same person that went in. This life has revealed what he truly was, his true colors. Yeah, what he had concealed in the heart, so to speak, is now coming out. He's not even concealing it seems. That's who he truly is. So how could he ever get Jannah even after 100 million, a billion years, 100 billion years? How could he deserve Jannah if he's intrinsically a rejecter of the truth, a zalim, a fasiq, a transgressor, an oppressor, a butcher, basically? If that truly who is what he is, how can he ever then deserve Jannah at any point in time in the future? Anyway, and if you were to say, well, maybe he should be tortured for 100 million years and then destroyed, like just cease to exist. Well, 100 million years cease to exist. Ceasing to exist is, in a sense, getting away with it, right? That if he was a true kafir, if he was someone that was a true hater of Islam, a butcher, and so on, even after 100 million years of burning, he ceases to exist. Firstly, all that 100 million years torture, he won't remember it because he'll cease to exist, and so it would be like it never happened. And he will be at peace because he will not be tortured anymore. He'll be dead. He'll be gone. He'll be, let me say dead, I mean gone, then ceased to exist. And in the Quran, it has the disbelievers calling out for destruction, like just destroy us, just please, just eliminate us, destroy us, right? And they won't be given that that destruction. They won't be given that way out. So, and that's just a few arguments. If you want a more in-depth response, I've written an article on my website called "The Justice of Hell," and I go through in much depth and detail to give more argument to that. But that's just giving you an example of an answer that makes it's more than simply just saying because Allah said so. Okay, it is very arbitrary. Okay. We have a question. Jahnavi, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I can't hear anything. I heard something. Jahnavi, no, I can't hear you. Sorry, I can't hear. Sorry, does anyone has a question while we wait for Jahnavi's microphone to work? Someone says, I understand Netanyahu example about what people are not that, but what about people who are not that bad, non-believers? How do you explain that? Okay, so I have written another article about that too, which is that I said the sinful muwahid, the sinful believer in one God, is better than um, a very sociable and friendly mushrik. Okay. Now, this is I wrote an article about it again on my website, AbdullahAl-Andalusi.com. AbdullahAl-Andalusi.com. It's down there, and I basically say this, which is, if someone follows their desires, so if someone rejects God, it's because they follow desires which are going against that. They want to do something. They want to follow where their desires lead, and their desires happens to be that they don't want to worship God, so they follow those desires. They don't want to reject the truth. They don't want to accept the truth for what it is. Okay. So, but let's say this is a person's a mushrik. He worships other gods, which obviously don't exist. They're false, but he worships other idols. Right? Sorry, idols, and not the true God. But they are like really neighborly, very nice. They are they're very pleasant to speak to, or smiling, giving, very charitable people. And you think, well, how could this person deserve Jahannam? Now, obviously, we leave each individual case to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I advise, don't go around the world, walk or down the street, or what have you, looking at people who might be sociable and thinking, oh, shame that old lady's going to go to Jahannam, shame that little kid's going to go to Jahannam. It's like, firstly, you don't know Allah's decrees for each individual person. Don't think about it. Don't even go there. Just don't, because it's pointless. Okay. Allah is just and he's merciful, and he will treat everyone. The Quran is actually assuring you of this, that no one will be treated unjustly, even in the slightest, to paraphrase. So firstly, no, don't think like that. Just know that everyone will be treated justly. So Allah will not do an injustice to anybody. Okay, now we've established that, we're going to speak in general terms. So the person who is a mushrik, so they worship other gods, which are false gods, than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the word God in English can mean anything that's worshipped. It doesn't mean if that's something that actually is a real thing that has infinite power and has unlimited knowledge and so on. No, It just means something, anything that's worshipped. That's why anything can be made into an, can be treated like an ilah, but it's not an ilah. Okay. So what the mushrik is doing when the mushrik is very friendly and neighborly and nice and rejects God, once they know the truth. If they don't know the truth, it's something else. But if they know the truth and they choose not to follow it, it's because they don't want to go against their desires. And you might be thinking, but this is such a nice person, as in they're sociable. Yeah, they're friendly. Okay, they treat other people in a pleasant way. Why they deserve punishment? And I say that, generally speaking, they choose their desires over the truth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just decreed that their desires would include being sociable and friendly. But if Allah had willed that their desires was something else, like, I don't know, psychotic, being a psycho, okay, I mean, having someone that suffers from who's a psychopath or a sociopath, that doesn't mean they want to kill people. It just means they don't have empathy, or they have problems with empathy. But if they are a person that, let's say, is a sadist, so they enjoy inflicting pain on other people, and they enjoy hurting people, and they enjoy committing crimes and doing evil things. The difference between the sociable neighbor who follows their desires and the person who commits murder and rape because they're following their desires is simply their desires happen to be different. If the sociable guy's desires had been something else, because they've made a god of their desires, they've chosen their desires over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would have done different things. That's the only difference between the two, is that the desires happen to be different. If the desires had said something else, they would have done something else. If they're not feeling like being good, they feel like being bad, then they'll be bad. They're just not feeling that. And that's what it is. Their desires are incidental. Their desires are arbitrary, right? As in, like, you don't control your desires a lot. Many of your desires are not controlled by you. You don't get to decide. What you do get to decide is whether you follow them when you know they clash with the truth, when they clash with what is right or wrong. That's the only choice you really get in this life. So that's why we don't look at whether somebody's sociable or not as a judgment as to whether they are a good person. A good person is a human being that follows their purpose in life. That's good, right? Like, if you have a car and the car has no engine and the car has no wheels, and the car is rusty, so you can't put anything in it. It will rust up anything you put into it because it is rusty itself. Is it a good or bad car? Right? Is it a good or bad car? You'd say it's a bad car. Why? Because it doesn't get you from A to B. It doesn't take you places. Because why? Because taking you places is what a car is for. So it's a bad car when it doesn't fulfill its purpose. But if it's a nice car, it has a good engine, good wheels, it takes you from A to B, good fuel economy, all that kind of stuff, you'd say it's a very good car because it gets me from A to B. I mean, ultimately, the purpose of the car is convenience. And so, good fuel economy comes into that as well, because it makes your life more convenient, but it's a good car. So if a human being is not following their purpose in life, they're a bad human being. It's as simple as that. Regardless of what crimes they're doing, if they are not following their purpose in life, like in the ultimate way, and so they are rejecting the creator of the universe, because the first thing you're meant to be doing is to ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah. You are bearing witness. The first thing you do, because you have a mind, you're seeing, you're experiencing this world, you're seeing, you're hearing, you're feeling. The first thing that you are meant to be doing as a witness in this world is to bear witness to the creator of the universe. Okay, that is your primary, the first thing you should be doing. So these people aren't even fulfilling that first basic step. Okay, that's one explanation. But you see how, as I said, I haven't taught you a new doctrine about Islam. I haven't said to you, hey guys, did you know that in the hereafter there is this? Hey guys, did you know? No, all I've done is simply explain to you the hikmah, the why Islam makes sense. Because what does the Quran say? Had this been from any other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you would have found many contradiction within it, right? And not just the Quran contradicting itself, but contradicting reality. There's no contradictions. So if you can show that there's no contradictions between Islam, reality, that it has consistent principles that are not self-contradicted by Islam. Like, for example, people say, oh, well, finite crimes deserve finite punishment, is actually not the principle going on here. That actually, depending on the nature of the crime, it can deserve an unlimited punishment, depending on the gravity of that crime. What I've shown is the hikmah, right? I think there'll be two other points I'll mention, but I also want to mention something very brief, because we did talk about atheism. So let's mention, how do we know God exists? All right, it's a very, very simple thing. And as I said, I've produced many complicated arguments, relatively well complicated arguments, and I've published them. But you don't actually need complicated arguments. Complicated arguments only arise because you meet complicated people, complicated atheists who come with complicated assumptions. The assumptions are not true, but the more complicated and elaborate the assumption is, the more you then have to complicate your responses to refute the incorrect assumption, right? But it's quite basic. The argument is very, very simple. I had a class I taught of 7-year-olds, 7 to 12-year-olds, and I actually explained how the proof of God to them very simply. You don't need to be a genius or to study philosophy to know this. And I'll give you maybe two simple arguments if you like. So the first argument is, you tell your child, and a child can understand this even at 7 years old. Trust me, I've tested it. There's even a 7-year-old girl I spoke to in my class. It was an online class, and she was saying, I actually discussed why does the Christian doctrine of the Trinity not make sense, and she actually came up with a refutation that is pretty much the same that I use at our advanced level to when I debate Christians, because I actually do debates, by the way. I debate Christian intellectuals. I used to debate them more than I do now. I now mostly do debate atheists, liberals, and others, and Zionists and many other people I debate. But I used to debate Christians quite a lot. And the argument she came up with is pretty much the same argument, just said more simply, but it's the same argument. It's the same thing. But with the issue of atheism, let's produce a very simple argument. Okay, so you tell the child, and again, the younger you start them on teaching them the hikmah of Islam, the better it is, by the way. Children are surprisingly intelligent at a very young age. Even at 7 years old, they're surprisingly intelligent. Apparently there was a IQ type of measurement that discovered that most people reach genius levels at about 10 years old, roughly. Boys about 10 years old, maybe girls slightly earlier, but they reach equivalent to genius levels, and then it declines after that at level, but because their brain can absorb all kinds of things, and they can think about stuff. So don't say they're too young, they don't know. No, start early. You'll be amazed at how much such an early start will enhance their IQ at a later stage in their life, how much their intelligence will be enhanced. It's simply because we treat them as children, that they remain, like children in a way. Okay, so here's the argument. Simply say, if you're in a room, let's just say you're in a room, and if your parents told you you could only leave this room after forever has finished, okay, or eternity has finished, or infinity has finished, whichever word they understand, just to say that. And they'll say, well, and I ask them, would you ever leave the room? And they'd say, no, we would never leave the room, because eternity never finishes, that it never ends, right? It just goes on forever. And I say, okay, well, if that's the case, then if I said to you that this universe has always been around, has been around for eternity, right? And before we reached this point, this moment, there was an eternity before that had to finish. Would we ever reach this point? And the child would say, no, we would never reach this point. So then if that means that there's no eternity before this, what's the opposite of that? When what's the opposite of eternity? And so that get the child to eventually come to the conclusion, well, that means that it was not eternal. That means then it started at some point. So then if the universe started at some point, what started it? Right? Because then can the universe create itself? Did you make yourself? And this child will say, no, I didn't. Okay, so you didn't make yourself. Did you just pop out of nothing? And the child will say, no. And by now, you should have already explained that they come from their parents. Okay, so right. Remember, children already they're fit to us. They're very rational. That's when they ask you where the babies come from. The question, where do babies come from? It's because they know that babies were not eternal. They were created. They didn't create themselves. They were created by something else. So it's the same thing. They say, well, you didn't make yourself. So the universe, it didn't make itself. It didn't come from nothing. So what's the answer to that question then? The answer to that question is that they were created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? They were created by the creator of the universe. He made everything, right? And the creator of the universe is eternal. He's uncreated. Okay. He doesn't change. He doesn't live in time. He created time. So he was always around and nothing created him. So that's where, and if they ask, well, if the universe was made, then what made Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Simply say, well, why do you think the universe was made? Because of time, right? And how do you know time exists? And eventually get them to, and it's best if you actually ask them questions until they come to it themselves. Don't spoon feed it. It's best if they come to it themselves, okay? And you say, and so by asking questions, okay, just ask questions, let them come to themselves. So like, well, how do you know time exists? And eventually get them to say, well, because change exists, because things changing. That's why you know time exists. So then if Allah doesn't change, why does he need a creator? And that's it. Okay, it's very simple. It's a very simple argument, right? You can use that argument, or alternatively, you can use the argument. You can use that in addition to not alternative. You can also say, ask your child, do you control everything in the universe? Do you control what happens to you? The child knows, well, no, I'm not. It's like, I don't control it. Are you the God of the universe? And the child says, no, I'm not, because I don't control everything. I say, okay. Did you make yourself? They said, no. The child was saying, no. Did you come from nothing? Okay, same thing in a sense. So if you don't control everything in the universe, is everything in the universe, so am I different to you? Yeah, am I a different thing? Like, am I the God of the universe? And the child says, no. So why not? Because you don't control everything, Say, do you control what happens to yourself? No. Do you control when you have pain? No, I don't control it either. Now look at everything else in this universe. Look at the mountains, look at the house you're in, look at this. Are these objects different to you in that? Like, do they make themselves? Do they control everything in the universe? So if they each of themselves were created, each of themselves didn't control themselves or what happens to themselves, and they do not control everything in the universe, then what is controlling everything in the universe? What created everything? And that's another way to come to the same conclusions. So everything can be destroyed. The sun, the moon, planets, everything can be destroyed. The mountains, everything can be destroyed. So then, if everything can be destroyed, then what is controlling everything? What is above everything? What is causing all these things to exist? And it is something that is nothing in this universe. It is outside the universe, and it controls everything. And if it does so, and you tell the kid, you have a mind, right? You can think, you can do actions, you can choose, right? Are you greater than what is beyond the universe? And they say, no. So then what is beyond the universe, does that not have a mind, but you have a mind? And so they'll say, no, of course not. Then that thing, by having a mind, meaning having a will, has a will, it can see you, and it wills everything in creation. So it's very simple. I made it very, very simple. I use more advanced arguments because an atheist who's 30 years old and is a skeptic who claims they study science will be, I'm not convinced by that. It's too simple. And that's where I make it more complicated for those kind of people. But that's as simple as it needs to be. So that's how you prepare your children. You, if they don't ask questions, why don't you ask them questions? Right, and in a way, ask yourself questions first. By the way, best to ask yourself questions first, and then get them to come to the answers themselves by asking them the right questions. Because really, you're getting them to think about these things, and they'll and if you say, "Well, this sounds to me very strange. This is not how Islam is meant to be taught," is it not? Does not the Quran say repeatedly that these are signs for those who reflect? Right? People say, "Oh, well, you talked about time and you used time to prove God's existence." That doesn't sound like a Quranic argument. Are you sure about that? Doesn't the Quran say, in the creations of the heavens and the earth, and in the alternation of night and day, are signs for those of understanding or those who reflect? Alternation of night and day, what's that? Time. That's what it is. That's how you measure time, is the alternation of night and day. Okay. So that is basically the situation, right? That the Quran is actually makes these arguments. You just never read it that way, or no one's ever read it to you that way. But the Quran itself makes the argument. The Quran, it tells those who reflect, who are sitting, standing, sitting, or lying on their side to reflect. You didn't make everything out, who reflect upon things. It talks about this. You didn't make everything out of for as a joke for no purpose. The Quran produces these arguments. These are arguments about people who reflect, those who think, those who ask, who ask questions and reflect upon the creation of the universe. You need to do that too. Now that's the other point. But I have two smaller points, and we'll end it there. The second point is and it's quite very simple, which is, do not connect Islam to non-Islamic culture, or to saying it respectfully, and they're saying it nicely, or they're even giving you advice. Do not say, "How dare you say this to your parents." The Islam says you should never say this to your parents. Well, speak the truth. Be respectful, yes, but that's different to speaking the truth. Even so, being respectful is not the same as obviously being rude, but speaking the truth is not the same as being disrespectful. Okay, that's my point, right? So, and don't disguise your bad habits with saying Islam, 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 and this comes in many ways. Where in many Muslim societies today, unfortunately, many people say they do something bad, and when they do something bad outside of Islam, they don't seem to care. But when they have a right on you that Islam requires, they then say Islam, Islam, Islam. Islam says I deserve this, but they don't give to other people what they deserve according to Islam. If you're going to commit dhulm, if you're gonna live your life outside Islam, don't you bring back Islam to justify your rights. Yeah, it's like being an outlaw. In English, we have the term being an outlaw. Outlaw means that you live outside the law. An outlaw doesn't mean that you don't live by the law of the land. It also means that the law doesn't apply to you. So technically speaking, someone could kill you and they would not be punished for murder because you're outside of the law. This was what it used to be back in the day, being called an outlaw. Right? You're outside of the law. You don't live by the law, and you're not protected by the law. So to use in this analogy, the case is that if you're a person that does not live by Islam, or you are not, are you doing some major bad things in front of your children that are not what Islam requires, don't only bring Islam in because when it suits you. Do you know why? Because it makes the children think that Islam is just about supporting dhulm. That's what it makes them think. They'll see it, that the only time they ever heard Islam being used was to justify an unjust situation where their rights were not respected, but someone else's rights were. And to the requirement for dignity and for fair treatment as part of the fitrah. So you're making the children go against their fitrah by saying, by only mentioning Islam when it suits you, but not when um, it's there right upon you, or when they see you treat other people um, in a bad way, where you don't care about other people's rights, but you then cite Islam for your rights. Many people have left Islam just on seeing that, and many people have become Muslim on seeing just good adab, good akhlaq, good practices. When they see someone embodying the principles of the Deen of Islam, that that example is it bears witness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they feel that Islam is true, it's real, because they see you living your life by it. Because our fitrah, part of our fitrah is we pay attention to what other people are doing. So if people are are avoiding a forest because it's dangerous, we will avoid that forest too, even if we don't know what the danger is inside, right? So if you see someone avoiding bad deeds because they know the danger, Jahannam, and they are seeking reward, Jannah, then people will follow. Their fitrah makes them want to follow you. Like, oh, you know what? This Muslim is acting in such a way that it's really a real thing. Maybe I should take it seriously as well. That maybe there is a Jahannam and a Jannah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to judge us. I need to, many people become Muslim seeing good examples. So that's the third point. And the final point, which I'll leave on this, is um, currently the Muslim world is in a backwards circumstance and situation. There's many reasons for that. I'm not going to get into it because that's a long discussion. But long story short, the Muslim mindset, there is a problem in the Muslim mindset. There are a bunch of assumptions that Muslims hold which prevent us from following Islam, from understanding as our purpose in life. I often say that the problem in the Muslim world is that Islam is part of the Muslim world's life. People say, what are you talking about? So the problem is that Islam is part of our lives. That doesn't make sense. Like I didn't expect you to say this. Why would you say this? And say, because it should be your purpose in life, not just a part of your life, but a purpose in life. So Muslims are not going to sacrifice anything for Islam, because Islam is only part of their life. They're living for other reasons as well, and those other reasons then become which are their day-to-day lives, their work, their what have you. These what you call culture, which in the ancient world they just simply call deen. Right? That in essence, Muslims are following two deens: Islam and some other deen. And then they only understand Islam as part of their culture. Islam is part of their culture. That's why they follow it, not because they understand it to be a purpose in life, because they never really questioned it. They never said, why am I following this? Because my parents are following it. So they're going to follow everything else their parents are doing as well, right? So if their parents are not rising up to march to demand the leaders unite and march on Palestine with united Muslim armies, they're not going to do it either, right? They're not going to do it either. So long story short, there's that. But in this situation where we are in an inferiority, when we're in an inferiority situation, we see the Western civilization who are militarily and economically superior at this point in time, never used to be. We feel that they must have some truth to them, and we are following something that's not true, especially because the West thinks itself is the center of the universe and that everyone else is backward and barbaric. And we start to think that too, because of their cultural, we think they are culturally superior because they are militarily and economically superior. That's not true. And one of the ways to really understand why the West has gotten to the position it is today, and also the problems within the West, the problems, the fact that it's actually, you can be a very advanced civilization, doesn't mean you're right. Advanced in technology, that is to understand the West itself. And on that, I would recommend that if as Muslims, you should understand the Western civilization as a civilization, not as a universal set of ideals to follow. many Muslims, when they go to university, they study, especially in the Western universities, they study subjects according to the Western framework, which assumes the West is universal. The Western morals, values are universal. They're not. They're specific to the West. I often have said, I wish we could study Western civilization like we study Egyptian civilization, like we study Egyptology. Egyptology is a study of ancient Egyptian civilization. No one studies Egyptology because they want to emulate or imitate Egyptian civilization. They study it as a detached academic subject to simply understand the ideas that were particular to that civilization, and they viewed themselves as universal. The ancient Egyptians viewed their civilization as the universal civilization, as the definition of human civilization. Everyone else was barbarians. So no one thinks, well, I'm going to study this subject and assume it's universal. No. And so we need to study the West in the same way. It should simply be a subject of study, not the object of our studies that we to emulate, but rather we are investigating it as a quirky civilization that's just that they're with their own particular situations, where they came from, their problems in their society, the assumptions they're built on, and so on. And to that, I would recommend a course that is provided by Balagh Academy, which is basically an introduction to the philosophy and history of Western civilization. It brings basically 3,000 years of history into a 12-session course. But it's taught by me, and where I go into the particulars of these different the different subjects within the West, how the Renaissance, Enlightenment, but starting with ancient Greece. Where did ancient Greece come from? Where did the first philosophers come from in Egypt, in Greece, and why? How did that impact and influence later Western ideas, and so on and so forth. So, and why Greece? Why was this place known for philosophy? Why not anywhere else? Well, there were places, but wait for the course for that. So you need to arm yourself with understanding that Western civilization is not a universal measure of good and bad, or is somehow a truly successful civilization, but simply that it is a civilization, one of many in history, with its own problems, but it rose to power like the Babylonian Empire, like the Roman Empire, like the Persian Empire, like the ancient Egyptian Empire, like the Incans and Aztecs. Doesn't mean they are true, just because they were very powerful and they ruled over multiple peoples at one point in time. So, and what led to their, what is actually causing their economic and scientific advancement? What is actually causing that? Where did that come from? Is it because of their beliefs in their ideas of liberalism and what have you, democracy, or is it something else? And they just simply added liberalism, democracy later on. These are questions that will be answered. So you need to actually arm yourselves and equip yourselves with understanding this in order to inoculate yourself and inoculate or vaccinate, you could say, you and anyone that goes, that you would recommend to do it against Western ideas. It's the best way to vaccinate yourself against Western ideas, is to study it as in a detached way, as a peculiar civilization. So there's a link in the chat section. Please follow that link and subscribe to that course. Okay, Barakallah fikum. I think I will leave it there. Is there any questions you'd like to raise before we end the session? No, I think all your questions answered. I think some of the comments, I see many Muslim parents buying Ramadan calendars, which are inspired by Christmas calendars that counts the days of December until Christmas Eve. So I wonder, are those parents helping their children come closer to Islam, or rather confusing them? As I said, you know, like if you imitate a people, you become one of, you become like them, become one of them. We shouldn't be using the West to imitate for any aspects. As I said, only those things which are not to imitate, but only things which are not related to culture but related to technology. So we can use a car, we can use a phone, and if there are good apps and efficient ways to drive and efficient ways to use a phone, these are matters of technology, and these are the only things that are universal is technology, not um, the cultural or customary cultural practices, right? But as I said, do not make the West your basis for emulation or copying. But at the same time, doesn't mean you don't wear like I mean like I'm wearing, you might say, Western clothing. It doesn't mean that I'm copying the West. It's just simply mean that this is what clothing is here. Clothing is sorry, clothing is customary, not cultural. And culture is anything in a civilization's way of doing things, way of life that they believe that they should be doing. So what is good and bad, that's their culture. What is customary is just what they've been doing for many years, and um, is an arbitrary practice that you don't have to follow. It's just usually the done thing. So you could go to another country and speak a different language than what they're speaking to you. You can go to China and speak Japanese to them. I mean, they probably won't like that, but no one, it's not, you're not going to get arrested for it, right? It's not like against the law, and it's not against the culture. It's just when no one's going to understand you, they're going to think you're weird. So you go to a country, and you live there. It's customary to speak their language, of course, the common language, whatever that is. That's a custom. But to celebrate Chinese New Year as your holiday, to eat pork dumplings and things like this, obviously you don't do that. So obviously some customs are haram, right? And some customs are mubah. They're just they're just custom. They're arbitrary. It's just how it is. But that's only for people living in that area of the world. So speaking English in England, yeah, you can do that if you want. You can speak French in England, but not many people are going to understand you. So you're not going to get arrested for it. It's just no one's going to understand you. You can wear Eskimo clothing in England when it's really cold. Sure, you can do that. No one's going to arrest you for it. Uh, you're they'll just think you're weird that you're wearing Eskimo clothing, you know. But it's not prohibited. It's not looked down upon. No one's going to think you have bad character for doing so. Of course, you can wear local clothing in winter clothing rather than Eskimo clothing in England, right? But these are just customary, orf, you could say. But don't. But the culture is about, what is, English. Let's say what it was. Well, there's no such thing as really English beliefs because that's always changed. But let's say the local religion is Christianity. It doesn't mean you have to follow that. Everyone celebrates Christmas. Doesn't mean you should celebrate Christmas, and so on and so forth. Those things. Totally unrelated. If we are creating pairs, what about those people who die without getting married? Is it they were put? Is it they were put in different times? Always wondered. Not not everyone marries their soulmate. Uh, well, the idea of a soulmate is. I mean, where'd you get that idea from? That's just a Western romantic uh, assumption. It became popular in fiction, and then people adopted it as an actual belief, which is kind of weird. It's funny, right? You know, there's also things as a soulmate. Okay, there's someone that you're destined to be with. It could be a bad person, it could be a good person, but there's no such thing as a soulmate. All life was created in pairs. All life was created in pairs, right? Sorry. Everything in the universe was created in pairs. We could see that for every quark there's an anti-quark. On the quantum level, we see there's for every type of particle there's an anti-particle that matches that particle. On a very fundamental level, for example, we see that yes, there are also many species. Most species have gender pairs, so male and female. We see cells divide by splitting into pairs, for example. Um, these are many of the ways that pairs occur in nature. It doesn't mean that you have a soulmate, that this is a perfect person for you. Now, it can be that there is a perfect person for you out there, but that you're not guaranteed. No one's guaranteed that, right? There's no guarantee that Allah made for you a perfect person for you, right? it's just a matter of probability that there's someone out there that has a personality that would be a good match for you. Yes. We'd say it's a high probability because there's like 8 to 9 billion people on this planet now, that there's someone out there in the world that has a good personality for you of the opposite sex. Yes. Um, sorry. Yes, someone has their hand up. Ibrahim, go ahead. I can't hear anything. Please go. So unmute your mic. Okay, so okay, wait for that person to unmute. Can people unmute their mics in here? I mean, I thought I had someone unmute their mic, so I think it's possible. Um, does the breakdown of the traditional family system and the rise of single parent households contribute to increasing trend of atheism among younger generations, particularly when women develop an aversion to male figures, absent fathers or negative male influences, and children subsequently extend this aversion to male religious figures like prophets or even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think it's even more fundamental than that, which is um, the West basically teaches you that you're most happiest when you're basically an individual. You are individualistic. You should focus on your desires first. That's when you're most happiest. That's what they teach you. Of course, the idea of having some kind of compromise in marriage and thinking about other person's happiness is not doesn't occur to them really truly. They don't teach that. And so what they've created is a generation of people that actually hate doing that, hate compromising or putting someone else's needs first. A marriage will work amazingly if you put the other person's needs first and they put your needs first, right? Rather than you put your needs first and they put their needs first. It actually feels more fulfilling in such a marriage because you feel valued, because love is about feeling valued. Okay. And while it's good to value yourself, um, and not be trodden on, of course, at the same time, that's not the fulfillment that you desire from companionship. You desire companionship, it's part of the fitra, and you desire that companionship not simply to be around somebody only, but to be valued by them. Okay. And you so everyone needs to be reminded of that value, which means you need to do things for that person that you might not initially enjoy yourself, but you learn to enjoy it because you see them happy and enjoying it. And then you know that the more you make them enjoy you, the more they value you as well, just as a natural result. And that increases love. So that's why, give gifts to increase love is a sunnah, right? So that, this understands human nature as it is. That's how you actually have a truly happy marriage. If you don't, if you say I don't feel like doing this, or I only like my man if he does something for me, and I won't like him any. If I make that as a condition, I'll only do things if he really spends lots of money on me, or I only take that into consideration, or so on. Then you're not going to have a happy marriage, because being selfish, and you will not respect the guy anyway, eventually. But at the same time, there are guys who don't appreciate their wives, and that makes it hard for their wives to continue to do good things to them when they feel no appreciation, because they need to feel that appreciation, right? So the marriage works the best when both people are putting each other first, um, in a way that values each other, without debasing themselves as well, because you need to be respected. You need to respect yourself and to be respected as well. So putting someone else first doesn't mean that you disrespect yourself at the same time. That's ultimately how a good marriage will work. But individualism doesn't say that. Individualism says that you should get married because someone else can bring you happiness and make you feel good, right? But they are an accessory to your life, right? They are meant to serve you, right? So that doesn't work. That if both the man and the woman come into that marriage with that mentality, then they're going to that's going to fail that marriage. And individualism is why people become atheists as well, because you can't truly be free if there's a God over you, right? As Mikhail Bakunin, the Russian author, said in the 19th century, he said, we can't be free as long as there's a tyrant in heaven. Okay, and that's why individualism leads to atheism. It's because to truly be free as an individual, you shouldn't be under any rules, any laws. And especially, or at least in your private life. But God controls your everything, including your private life. The rules He gives are also part of your private life. And so people say the only way to be free is to not believe in God, because they argue, why does God want all these things? He doesn't need it. Why does He ask for it? Right? They don't understand purpose in life. They don't understand that He made us to voluntarily choose to worship Him. Right? He doesn't need it, of course. He doesn't need it. The Quran tells us he doesn't need it, of course. But just because he doesn't need it doesn't mean that He doesn't have a right to demand this of you, especially when He's sustaining your existence. They treat God as a separate individual. They say, well, look, okay, if God exists, He does His thing, let me do my thing. Like, I'll be a good neighbor. I say, well, no, it doesn't work like that, because you are sustained by Him. Yeah, He's literally sustaining you and your house and giving your wealth and everything. Okay, you're not outside His control. You don't live separate from Him. You're not an individual, independent existence from Him. He's independent. You are dependent on Him. Yeah, you're not truly an individual in that sense. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only true individual in terms of being fully independent. You're not independent at all metaphysically. You are affected by other people, let alone affected by the creative universe who sustains you. That is why individualism. That's how individualism leads to atheism primarily. The collapse of the family is a symptom of individualism, not the cause of it. But of course, it makes it worse. It makes things much worse. Like if children from a broken home don't hate their father necessarily, because they'll have split custody usually. But what usually happens is that the children are used as weapons against their parents. So each parent tries to gain custody of the children. And in the Western system, which considers obviously that to be an equal system, although it primarily privileges women in those situations, many fathers are forcibly estranged from their children because the mothers to use the children to get revenge on the father by denying the father access to those children. Of course, what actually ends up later on in life is the children hate the mother for doing that, because they were deprived of their father. So this doesn't really work exactly like as is imagined. But anyway, I know of tons of cases, although this is really just just obviously just from my experience. But I know tons of experiences where there's tons of people I'm observing, and they tell me their stories, and they basically say that they hate their mother because their mother stopped them from seeing their father when they was young. So this is anecdotal, but still, it's something I've encountered. Okay. Any other questions? Ibrahim, can you unmute? Are you able to unmute? Ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you. It's Asr time here. That's why I was off a bit.
Oh, you wanted to pray Asr?
Yes.
Okay. Well, yeah. This whole lecture is recorded, so you should be. You can
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you can watch it back, inshallah.
Yeah. There's something that I just want a bit of explanation. When you said customary and culturally, that they are different, but I don't see the difference. I think they're all intertwined. So can you explain a bit further, please?
Sure. So that's because the word culture is used to cover everything that a society does, right?
Okay.
Whereas in Islam, we have very, very precise definitions. Or we have deen and urf, and they're not the same thing, right? So I tried. So they would approximate to a deen would be culture, religion, culture, ideology, way of life. All these words would be
Yeah.
the word deen could be applied to all of them. That's what deen is. Okay, deen is how you live, um, by what values you live, and your beliefs. So your view of the world and what you think is good or bad. That is deen. Deen is what you think is good or bad, because deen comes from the Arabic, the root dayin, meaning what is owed. So your duty. What are your duties? That is deen. So any society that has an idea of duties, that is their deen. So what you should do, what you shouldn't do, right? That is what is expected from you, what is owed. That's why Yom Deen, the day of actually the word deen is used to mean there you get the day of everyone getting what they are owed. Yeah, or what they are due, what is due to them, what is they deserve, right? So deen can mean that. So if you go in any society, look at anything that they say is expected from you. So what is good or bad, what you should and what you shouldn't do, that is their deen. And then there are things which are not part of what you should and shouldn't do. It's just a practice they do around there that became a common practice, a long-term practice. It's just a common practice, but you can do it, you can not do it. No one's going to think differently of you. They just think you're weird if you don't do it, but they don't think you're bad, or they don't think you can't go. They wouldn't take you to court for over it. That's called custom, right? Or at least I would say it's called a custom, right? So urf in Arabic, right? Urf. So custom is simply the language of that country, the style of dress in that country, and I don't mean if they show or cover up stuff, or that, but rather the type of clothing, the patterns and that kind of thing. So, that's why, for example, let's say a Pakistani clothing is different from North African clothing, is different from Nigerian clothing, but they could all be Muslims. The urf is different, but the deen is the same. Okay. The style of food you have is customary too, usually. So the food in the popular food or the historical food in your location of the world is part of the urf, the practices down there. How they choose to celebrate. So they might celebrate with halwa, or with dates, or with Turkish lukum, whatever. The sweets they bring to a celebration, the type of drum they use in a celebration, these are all customs. Okay, so you can have different customs in the Muslim world, right? Those are things where you don't have to follow it in that area. It's just what they do in that area, as in the common practice. But you don't have to do it, right? So that's the difference between customs and urf. So as Muslims, we're not allowed to copy the deen of anyone else. And by copy, I don't mean not have anything in common, because of course we can have something in common. So part of our deen is don't commit murder. Part of the deen in the West is don't commit murder, at least to people in the West anyway. So we don't refrain from committing murder because we're copying the West. We refrain from committing murder because it is our deen that refrains us from doing so, right? Whereas in the West, it is customary to speak, let's say in England, speak English. So we speak English if we're in England, right? It's customary to wear shirts that have collars like this, and trousers that maybe are jeans in some way, or suits in a certain way. Okay, if that's the custom, you can do it. It's just a custom. That's not a problem. You don't have to wear a kurta or a shua kameez or something like this, because the custom doesn't matter. But if it is part of the Western tradition, a custom to, let's say, go to the pub, for example, to drink alcohol, which is a custom where you're not expected to do it. Well, actually, sometimes they are expected to do it, but you're not morally required to do it in the West. It's just a custom that they do. You would say, well, I don't do that custom because that is haram, but I can copy other customs if I am living permanently in that region. Right? So I can copy all the halal customs, but I will not copy your haram customs, and I will not copy your deen. If I'm practicing my deen and it happens to coincide with your deen in some points, like trading and being nice and being good neighbor, yeah, great. But I'm not doing it because I'm copying you. I'm doing it because I'm living as a Muslim. And of course, Islam also commands you to fulfill your contracts. And if you live in a Western country, you have a contract with the government to follow the laws, as long as the laws don't force you to commit haram. So, like, pay tax and yada yada yada. So these are the kind of things which you as a Muslim, so like I said, don't break the law and what have you. Sure, okay, fine. I won't break the law. I won't drive past the red traffic light. Things like this. Yeah, that's because you as a Muslim, you have to stick to your agreement. And the understanding is that everyone that lives in a Western country has to agree to the laws that are declared by the government, as long as those laws do not command you to commit haram. So, and even that's conditional. So that's what I'm saying. So I hope that makes it clear. So in living in the West, you can copy the halal customs only, but you can't copy their deen, and you can't copy their haram customs. And so someone says Christmas is celebrating Christmas is a custom or deen. For Christians, it's deen. For atheists, it's in the West, it's a custom, but it is a haram custom because we are only meant to have 2 Eids as Muslims. 2 Eids. And I want to clarify for everybody, 2 Eids, that is 2 Eids of public celebration. It doesn't mean you can't celebrate. I've passed my driving license. I've passed my, I've got a driving license. I've passed my exams. I'm having a child. I want to celebrate. Yeah, of course, but that's not a public holiday, of course, right? So the Muslims can only have 2 public holidays. You can celebrate a whole bunch of things, which are private, non-public holiday things. That you want to do. You want to celebrate your friends having a child. Great, go. Celebrate. Give them a gift. Come. They can have a halal party. Great, but you don't celebrate public holidays that are not from Islam. Okay. So
Assalamu alaikum. Can I ask just one more question, please?
Wa alaikum salam. Go ahead, sister.
Yes. Like the children growing up in the West, like in England, the Muslim children, is it all right if we decorate like the Eid Mubarak, like the decorations Christmas time, so that our children do not look up to Christmas, yearning for Christmas, but they yearn for the Eid, Eid, the Eid, the 2 Eids that we have. Is it all right if we do the decorations and then make wrap gifts for them, so that they look up to our Eid instead of looking up for Christmas or Easter time?
To be honest, this goes into the area where you'd probably need a mufti to give you a more specific hukum, because of the type of decorations. Are we allowed to imitate Christmas decorations in a non-Christmas time? So, okay, we don't do it for Christmas, but can we use, let's say, tinsel and bubbles and whatever they use? I mean, let's use a more common example. Can you have a Christmas tree, right? A pine tree for Eid? Well, no one would do it because it sounds strange, looks strange. But why are you doing it? I suppose is the question, which is like, well, is it just to imitate how the Christians practice their Eid? So I would say, I'm not a scholar. I suspect the scholars would say not to use the types of decorations which are associated with haram Eids. Whereas, I mean, like people, you know, I mean, like in India, it's more obvious, right? So, Hindu celebration, you know, like, are you going to start throwing colored powder on each other, you know, as to celebrate Muslim Eid? You're not, right? Because no, that is not the Muslim way. That is the Mushrik way, right? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, you're just following colored powder on each other. That's not, you know, that's not. It's not shirk in of itself, right? But why would you? But you'd know very clearly that that's associated with what the Mushriks do. So you might be prohibited from doing so because that is associated with what mushriks do, or the kafir, or those who are not Muslim, what they do. You know, as Muslims, we're not allowed to drink cups that resemble wine glasses, for example, even if we're drinking water
Okay.
from them. Now, I'm not. This is not a
Okay.
hukum. It's not a hukum because I'm not qualified to give you hukums, right? I'm just. I'm not a mufti. I'm just simply presenting to you the reasons which I would ask you to consult a mufti on these things. There might already be websites that give these things, but there are other ways to celebrate Eid. So yeah, gifts for children, not a problem. Why not? Sweets, gifts, make them love Eid, make them have that connection to Eid. Yeah, of course. Does it have to be
Yeah.
wrapped up in Christmas wrapping paper? I'd say that sounds a bit weird for me as a Muslim, but I would say, you know, can you give them a gift as a surprise gift? Well, yes, you don't have to show them those gifts, but you can give them a surprise gift. Can you use non-denominational streamers, as they call it, like, you know, decorations not associated with any particular celebration of any particular you know, culture, like streamers and confetti and what have you, you know, those birthday hats, you know, what have you, right? I mean, I don't know, I mean, not for Eid, but like, I'm just saying that, you know, it's but they're not, yeah, they're not connected to a particular kind of an Eid from a different deen. So I would say an Eid connected to a deen, like most Western deens are, Eids are, Halloween, Christmas, Easter, those things we should not imitate. Things connected to them, I suspect would be what a mufti would say to you, but I can't give you a hukum on it. So please ask them.
Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair.
وياكم. May you also share information about the class you offer the youth. I taught it before a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, I don't teach those online classes anymore at this point in time. I was it was for it was only for a limited time only. I was commissioned to do, and then although I was moved on to other things. Well, I went into other things to be more precise. How to best respond to our children and others in the West. Okay, yeah. Well, as I said, like I may return back to it, but ideally, you should see yourselves as being able to teach these classes to children as young as 7 years old, teaching them very advanced concepts. Just simply think to yourself, how do I simplify it or how do I explain it with words that a child understands? And you'll be surprised how much they can understand. You'll be very surprised. Right? Proof of God, why Islam is true. I wanted to show that you could teach children those things, although because I based on other studies that show that children can be taught those things. So these online classes started, and I taught children about gravity, about why, you know, why the sun, why we orbit the sun at 7 years old, right? The creation of the universe. I taught about them logic, everything. At 7 years old, you know, and they understood. So, can I ask a question with Mike, please? Yeah, go ahead, Ibrahim. Will I just put your hand up and ask?
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa
Uh,
rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah for the talk. So I've got two children. One is 10 years old and the other one is about 5. And the 10-year-old, he's at the age now when he's starting to be a bit more curious. And with his friends in primary school, and he sees in his primary school, we live in Portsmouth and there's not many Muslims there. He's probably 1 or 2 in the class. So most of his friends are non-Muslims. Um, but his character is such that when he finds something difficult, he likes to give up. So he was saying recently, "Oh, I think this is all fake. I don't know why I don't believe in God and things." I mean, he does the actions just because I tell him to, and he comes with me. Like for example, Taraweeh, he'll come not for a reason, but because he wants to see his friends there. But he was asking this question. I tried my best to explain it. Obviously, when you speak to an adult, it's slightly different to when you speak to a child. And I was trying to give him some like logical reasoning, like where did we come from and so on. But I'm not sure whether it's because of emotional reasons or if it's intelligent question in like what it is specifically. I mean, I think at his age, it's for example, the arguments like cosmological arguments and things, even if you dumb it down for the children, I'm not sure if that's what's holding him back or because of his friends or what the case is. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Okay, that's why I recommended a method. I mean, people call it the Socratic method, but really it's just asking questions. So the Socratic method of teaching, Socrates, he basically just what he would do is you'd get a student and he wants to teach a student something. So instead, what he does is he just asks questions. He doesn't tell the student what the answer is. He asks the student the questions to make the student come to the answer themselves. That you can only really instill something into a child truly if you make them think about it and come to the answers themselves by asking them questions. But it has to be like like if they can't, if you say to them, well, where do you think we came from, or did we come from nothing, or what have you. So if you make an open-ended question like where do you think we came from, then that's too much of a vague or broader question for a child that might be too lazy, as you said, like maybe think, well, I don't know. That's it. Right. So then you break it down. Well, where do you think you came from? You particular. Make it down into smaller chunks, ask smaller questions. Say, well, I came from, you and mum. And they say, well, how do you know that? All right. Like, maybe you just came from nothing. You just popped into existence. Right. Or maybe you created yourself. Right. And if the child says, well, okay, maybe I did create myself. All right. Well, if you made yourself, that means you chose how many fingers you had, right? So give yourself an extra finger. Give yourself bigger height then. Now, can't. So you didn't make yourself, clearly, and you can't control what happens to you, right? So then who is controlling what's happening to you? You see, these are asking questions, just asking questions until the child comes to the answers themselves. You have to bring them to the answer themselves without telling them the answers, right? Because they won't accept. A lazy child might not accept it, or I'm not saying it's lazy. I'm just saying that a child that doesn't want to think about these things might not want to come to it, and that's because there are reasons why, because maybe the simple things they want in life, friends, games, playing outside with their mates, if they do that, and if children do that anymore. These things don't require much, don't require you to think about them, right? So these questions about Islam, and especially in a secular society, Islam is viewed as not relevant, right, to their life. Right? So many Muslims think that secularism can't harm their deen or their family. So secularism will harm you. It'll harm your children because Islam is not relevant, right? They see Islam is not relevant. Only if the Muslim society is close knit, such that their mini society, Islam is relevant to them. But beyond that, especially in non-Muslim, if they're with non-Muslims, they might think Islam's not relevant. No one cares. Sometimes being with non-Muslims might reaffirm it. They see they are different. Islam makes them different from these other people, and they affirm it. So sometimes it goes that direction, the opposite direction. So it depends on the child, it depends on circumstances. But with your child in particular, if you're saying that he, so tell me. So when you say he just gives up on something, if it's too hard.
Yeah. So I think that's just a character trait of it. So we go to karate together, and when we've graded, he's like really happy. I'm going to continue with it. But when he struggles on something, he's like, oh, I don't want to go anymore. I don't want to do this. Or likewise, when we're doing like memorization of surahs, when he's done the same ones, he feels confident and he's happy to continue. But when he struggles on the next stage, he's like, I don't want to do this. I hate this. And I think that kind of shoots out onto every aspect, no matter what it is. So if you find something difficult, you just want to give up. And I'm not sure if that's all kids or if it's just my one or what the case is.
Okay, when it gets graded, sorry, what do you mean?
So on in karate, you grade from like yellow belt to orange belt, and then you go up into the next grade. So as you develop, it becomes more and more difficult. So when he gets to the next stage, as he finds it more difficult, he initially just gives up. So I have to encourage him, and that was just one example of where he needs more encouragement to be able to continue. Otherwise, he would just give up. Same with reading books. So if he reads a book, he will always read the same kind of books. Called Diary of a Kid. He'll keep reading that same one because it's just easy for him, but he won't develop himself to make it a bit more harder because he just reverts back to something that's easy. So he doesn't like to take on challenges. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's more of a, obviously they call it a pedagogical question. How to encourage a child, how to motivate the child, rather than an issue about atheism and what have you. But why would your child say it's all made up?
I think because he's finding it difficult to. So he goes to the masjid on Saturdays and Sundays, and as he's going there, sometimes he'll want to stay home and play games, or sometimes he would want to do something different. But because he has to go there, he's thinking, "Oh, I don't like this." So I'm not thinking if it's a genuine question or because the fact that it's making it difficult for him to get what he wants. So that's why I was a bit unsure. Was it generally, does he believe that it's not real or not? I mean, he does the practices, but then again, to your earlier question, he's doing it because he's doing it for me rather than his beliefs. So at the moment, I'm not being too strict with him. Like with the fasting, for example, he's done 1 or 2 fasts, and I told him, if you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it at the moment. So I'm not pushing him, but I'm just feeling in the background maybe it might lead to that. Perhaps I'm not too sure. I just want to kind of get it, kind of nib it in the bud, as they call it, before it gets to that point.
Sure. Does he have any siblings?
Just the one younger brother, a 5-year-old.
One younger brother. And how old is he?
5. So the younger brother's 5.
And how old is the older one?
10 years old.
10 years old. Okay. Well, there are ways to motivate kids. It depends on the different strategies. One of them is, for example, you withhold privileges pending them doing something that they need to do. So you're teaching them the value of work, you could say. So if they achieve something, they get a perk, they get a benefit. I mean, in people who design computer games, they do the same thing. You defeat a boss, you get these power-ups in a certain way, and you get these rewards in game for unlocking levels and unlocking this, blah blah blah. Right, so they understand this basic thing, and parents should do the same. If you say, "Oh, I don't want to be too hard on him, so I'll let him have play games," and then I will ask if he would voluntarily do exertions and things. Well, he's not going to do it because he doesn't have to. In his head, he's like, "I don't need to do these things. I get these perks without having to do any work." Right, so why then do the work for it? Why then do all these extra hardships, which are unnecessary, right? So whereas you should make it a condition. You get these if you do this, right? So you say your choice. You don't want it. You don't want to do the work. Great. Then you don't get the privileges, and that's it. That's how it should. That's one way. It depends with different.
Is there a fear? Because I was doing that with like games, like again playing on his Switch. That if that won't really, because I wanted to transition so that eventually he wants to do it for the right reasons. But I fear that if I do it like this, then he's only going to do it for that reason. And then when I'm gone, just like in that story you said when the father died, then that connection is gone, and I don't want that to happen.
As I said, like this is more about child psychology, and I'm not a child psychologist, and so it's hard for me to I'm afraid to give you something with confidence, other than I can give you strategies, and different strategies can work, and others might not work. So when I was younger, my mother put a whole bunch of books in my room, a variety of books. She got it from people would throw out books, and she would pick them up very cheap. And they were all kinds of things. There was stuff on advanced chemistry there, like stuff I would never be able to understand as a 6-7-year-old. It's like I never understand this, but she left it there. Right, she just left it there. She got me a National Geographic subscription, which was a magazine that dealt with science, geography, history, a whole bunch of things. Very fascinating. I loved it. She left it in the room, never told me to read it, just left it there. And this was maybe before computer games and things like this coming out, although I would get a computer PC, and I would have computer games later on, in maybe towards 9 years old, 10 years old, maybe 10, 11. But before that would be a TV with only 4 channels, and that was it, because that was what British TV was like at the time, and books. So I would get bored, and so I would just start reading the books because I was bored. And pretty soon I built up a general knowledge just because I was bored. I also started to become curious. So I had a curiosity. I don't know if that's a feature of me, or many kids are curious. It is a natural feature of many children, but children can be different because of their circumstances, because of whatever. And one of the issues is that your child is in a society where obviously they were introduced to games at a young age, introduced to quick fixes, quick what's it called? Quick access to short-term pleasures and things like this. Which is what games provide, and YouTube provides. I don't know if he watches YouTube, but the problem is,
I think most children do this. It's hard to keep them off. So
Yeah,
we always restrict it, because otherwise they'll be on the 24/7.
Yeah, I'll give you a surefire. I mean, this is a surefire way to raise a child to be very intelligent, more than their peers, to point of almost genius level, and comparatively, that is, and to make them very devout. But it's too hard for most parents in this day and age because of our work commitments, which is the child should not have access to TV, not have access to computer games or computers until much later on in their lives. And like 11, 12 probably, and should only be surrounded by books and creative toys like Lego. I love Lego. Lego was very fascinating because it was very creative, right? So I had to think about, if I want producing things and making things in certain ways, I could make it was like making my own toys, because I could make different types of cars and spaceships and anything I wanted from these bricks. I just have to think about how I can do it with these building blocks. So it was very creative. It was a very good. I remember even thinking as I was a child, this is a very good, toy for my brain, because I'm thinking about stuff a lot. It's very creative. It's like the gift that keeps on giving, because I can make any toy I want. That was great. And being left with only books, and if I was bored, I would read them because there's nothing else to do. So in a way, I was forced to do it. Okay. And that was it. But other children are high maintenance, right? So they will I was also a little bit of a scamp when I was young as well. I was a bit naughty. I was very naughty, in fact. They might say that the more intelligent a child is, the more naughtier they get, because their naughtiness is just experimentation. And so I'd like to I don't know if that is a measure of my intelligence, but if naughtiness is a measure of my intelligence, I was genius level. Right. But anyway, I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, my point being is that's the hard way, but that's the way that will make sure your child is very, very intellectual, very switched on, and will have some sense of discipline when they grow up. it's harder. It's not nice. They don't. It's not pleasant for kids in this generation, but after they're used to having that YouTube. But you know, my recommendation is cold turkey it, as they say, in some way. Get them off it, and they're not gonna. And it's not gonna be pleasant for anyone in the family. It is not going to be pleasant. And as for your 5-year-old, it's easier now because they haven't even been they haven't been too much accustomed to it. But don't let them watch TV as much. They say watching TV is as bad as sleep deprivation in terms of the psychological effects it has on the children and their brain development. It is bad. It is a bad device. But some parents, because they're very busy, they're tired, they just switch TV on, put their kids in front of it, and they can go do the housework and do yada 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 because their kids are entertained. But TV doesn't make them think, and they become more passive observers, and it has detrimental effects to memory, their memory, be able to retain knowledge, thinking and everything, because they don't think. Whereas reading a book, a storybook, you have to use your imagination to conjure up the world that you're reading and learn definitions of words. It improves vocabulary, how to speak, being eloquent. You know, it's not the most easiest thing to do. I take that, but that is a very surefire way of your child being emerging with discipline. So if the child, you know, give them house duties that they need to do, to have any kind of an allowance, let's say, you know, to get, so they need to know that to get anything they have to work, and the more they work or the better they work, the better the rewards. So if they do something very quick, they get a bit extra reward. You know, if they do efficiently, more efficient, they work better, they work smarter. You have to link it to that, otherwise they're gonna be emotionally unregulated when they get older. They're going to be undisciplined, and without able to discipline themselves, they're going to be very bad at working in jobs and having a career or doing anything. And yeah, Islam is viewed as a chore. Going to madrasa is viewed as a chore because it's not linked to their life at all, apart from just saying salam alaikum, saying mashallah, alhamdulillah, you know, and praying and fasting once a year, and that's it. You know, like it has to be more than that, and that's difficult because you live in a non-Islamic society. And yeah, that's why obviously an Islamic environment is always the ideal. But anyway, short of that, these are I've probably given you challenges, but really I've given you some creative ideas. But I can't say for certain what will work well with your son. Only you and a trained child psychologist might be able to ascertain that, and then they'd have to speak to your son and get to know obviously more about him to see.
That's great. Jazakallah, it's very useful.
Sure. As I said, like if you even turn the idea of asking questions into a game, you know, that there's reward after that. So if you get the right answer, you get a reward. You get a chocolate bar that you've been wanting. If you get the right answer, and so on. And they'll be clever. They might say, okay, you just want me to say God, and then at the very beginning say, hey, so where do you think you came from? God. Okay, no, do we get chocolate bar now? You have to show the working out, right? So in a way, you almost switch it on them and say, actually, I'm going to be the skeptic now, and you're going to have to prove it to me, right? And then you get the chocolate bar, right? Yeah, whatever, stuff like that. Be creative. Yeah, turn it into a game and give them reward, but link that reward to doing something, some work, or in some way, invent something for them to do, just so that they can they do it, they can get that privilege. But if you give them that privilege with no work, then they say, well, if I got it once for free, I can get it again for free. So why do I have to do this all the work that is unnecessary in my life? Understand? That's yeah. Okay. Yeah, cool. Someone asked me to is any unfortunately I don't know any books designed for kids that will teach them about Islam in the way I described. So I'm doing what people should do if it's not available, which is I'm doing it myself. So I'm working on writing a book about in essence you call it a proof of Islam book, one for adults and one for children as young as 7. So I'm going to design a book that's for children as young as 7 to inshallah come to the truth of Islam. and how Islam can change the world, how they can change the world. That's another thing. If you actually show kids that Islam can change the world, it has better solutions to mankind than the current society. Islam is a guidance such that you actually have, you can solve all the problems in the world. Islam is a superpower, right? It's a power, young people are going to love it because they want to make a change in the world. And Islam is viewed as unnecessary to them. You have to make it, if you no, it's a superpower. You actually you're imbued with something better than those who are not enlightened by Islam have. You have knowledge of solutions, how to improve the world, how to change the world for the best, right? It's a superpower. Children will love that because children want to become heroes. Because heroes is them becoming into adults, and that's what they want to find their place as adults. So give them that, inspire them in that, right? But you need to know itself how Islam is a superpower, right? And so that's one way of putting it. But yeah, mashallah, obviously, if you go to my website, AbdullahAl-Andalusi.com, it's mentioned there. I have an emailing list. Just subscribe to put your email down on the emailing list, and when I produce that book, I will publish it on my website, how to access it and what have you, and please, and then you can get that book. But so if you want to follow, subscribe via email to my mailing list, and I don't mail out. You're not going to get like tons of emails. You only get the occasional email, once or twice a month max. But it's only. But I will publish my book and I will have it available. Then I will announce it on my website, inshallah. Some say, what's it? Dua is a superpower. Dua. Yeah, dua is a superpower. That's also something that is you could show the kids and tell the kids. But also how Islam obviously is a superpower because it's the knowledge of the universe. Like what's behind the universe. What the ultimate truth behind reality is, and what it wants of us. That's a superpower, right? As well. Right? So, there's a great book on dua. Great. Buy it, share it with your kids, but also more than just dua as well. Okay, Raham says, I use this book to get kids that work that you work with to begin their journey with Islam and build it into their purpose in life. Well, then good, alhamdulillah. Then that's a good book. Then that's great. And it could be part of their journey. There's a hand up from Ibrahim again. Go ahead, sister.
It's a mistake, sorry.
Oh, it was a mistake. No problem.
Yes.
All right, then. Any other questions? I think we'll leave it there. Okay. Khair, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. Please do sign up to that the course on I give on Western society, Western civilization, and its philosophy. I make it very accessible, so you'll be able to understand it. And it will explain the major questions you probably would have about Western civilization, but also you'll understand it in a way you never did before. But why they think the way they are, why the mindset is the way it is, how individualism was started, where it came from, the assumptions behind their society, their weaknesses behind their philosophies, and an explanation as to why they became. It took a long time, but they became, at least for now, the one of the most powerfulest civilizations at the moment. But obviously why that's not related to their values. It's not related to the ideas of individualism or liberalism. That's not why they became powerful. It was more a side effect of the process that made them powerful. Okay, barakallahu feekum. Hope to in a sense see you in a sense on that course. Although it's pre-recorded, but and please do subscribe to my website, and jazakallah khair, and I hope to see you guys all again in future. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاك الله خير.